Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Potato sacks? Okay, so it's a photo of two people in potato sacks. It looks so on these like this wire little frame is this yellow sign and it says potato sacks. And on the left, is that you on the left with the sunglasses? Okay.
Yep.
Just holding up a potato sack, you're standing in it. And on the right is a gentleman wearing a green shirt, white cap, white shorts or pants in a potato sack as well. Both of you are kind of smiling, kind of like almost sheepish.
Yeah.
In the far, far background is the porta potties and these beautiful large trees. You're in a park. The grass is like this beautiful, high, lush, green, but very short. High but short. Sort of clover style, nice grass. Nobody else is in a potato sack, so it's just you two. It doesn't seem like there's anybody around you guys. So, what's this story? What lesson are we going to learn from this?
So this for me was my North Star in business and leadership.
Oh,
and just like how to be a good human. It has always been my dad. Like
that's your dad.
That's my dad.
Oh, sweet.
We have a family business that runs girls fast pitch softball tournaments back in Ohio.
Oh, wow.
So it was he was a serial entrepreneur his entire life, retired. My mom was also an entrepreneur. She retired a little bit before he did. And after 6 months, she was like, you need to come up with something for your dad to do. Mm-hmm. We've been married for 45 years and he's driving me crazy. You got to get him out of the house. And so he had coached me, had coached my sister, and then continued to coach. Was a really good softball coach. And I don't know, I've never met anyone in my life that has ever been more interested in fun than my dad. Like that is just what drove him. He was like always goofing around. He was just like everything. There was nothing that shouldn't be fun. Mm-hmm. So he would always just follow these crazy ideas. He'd be like, wouldn't it be fun if ... So he created this thing at the softball tournaments, and these are like big. I mean, these are 200 team events. Like they're big events.
Wow.
And he would be like, you know what would be really fun is if we had this area that the kids could just play and do things like hula hoop and potato sacks and whatever. And be like, Dad, why do you have to make it harder? Like it's already hard enough. Why do you have to continue to make it harder? And he be like, well, because it's fun. Like who wouldn't want to do that?
Nice.
So we had finally pulled it off and like got so that was just he and I in one of the little stations that the kids could do was potato sacks. So he, that was it. And then 6 weeks before my oldest was born, he had an aneurysm, and he was on vacation with my mom, had an aneurysm. My sister and I went to go meet them on vacation, and he never woke up. So that was right before, at that point, it was like a week. So 5 weeks before my first son was born.
Oh,
so
man.
he has my sister has two daughters. So we had two granddaughters, but never had a grandson. And we were from a family of two girls and whatever. So now I still run the softball tournaments in the summer.
Wow.
My mom and I do, and a really great team of friends that are like family to us that we run them with. But that was one of my, I think, business of like going back and kind of surviving, going back the year after that happened. So it happened in November and our events are in June and July, and like having to learn on the fly, I think was important. I mean, there's so many, I can go on with this one forever, but there's so many lessons in that, right? I mean, I think the biggest one was I remember going back and like for the first time and we had done it together for 10 years at that point. And for the first time, it wasn't fun. And I didn't I knew You can edit this part out. Um, I was in charge of logistics and making the thing happen, and he was always in charge of keeping it light and keeping it personal. And he left, and that was gone. And I knew that it was equally as important for me to center that joy in the experience, because that's why people came to our events. I mean, they were good and they were well run and they were organized and all the things, but at the end of the day, like, your team could go 1-4, but if you got to sink your coach in the dunk tank, you remembered the event, right? Like, that was like, we had dunk tank, like, that was it. And so my role wasn't just to continue the events, it was to continue the culture of the events. And then that was on me, and that was a privilege, not a burden.
Of course, of course.
And how do you embrace that, right? Like, how do you do all the things? Like, I don't know. I don't think I realized, I think I took for granted what he did, because he pulled away slightly as he got older in like the nitty gritty pieces of it, but it just spoke to me of how your energy, one person's energy, especially somebody who's making the calls, but sets the tone for the staff, for the event, how contagious that is, and that it wasn't just X's and O's, and that was a formative change in the breadth of what leadership looked like to me.
Beautifully said. And these conversations, doors get opened and we just sort of waltz through, and I, come in and we've just met, and the sort of the platform or the foundation is set of leadership with courage. And so the idea of like sharing this part of who you are and your experience with this really sweet photo, potato sacks with your father, and then showing and sharing that vulnerability, because of having that moment of, because this is your life. So when you're talking about this, it's not this antiseptic thing. This is part of who you are, in the same way that he is part of who you are. And running this event for all these kids and talking about it just brings you back, is what makes it real. So this idea of setting the tone and leading by example, and which you are clearly doing by sharing this. How does that influence you as a speaker, in that when you go in and so right now you're very comfortably being able to channel and access that real and not hide from it, which takes courage, right? Because many people would be like, oh, I don't want to look whatever, or sound whatever, have this artifice, but be really authentic and genuine. So obviously who you are is an extension of who he is and was. And so how much of what you talk about were lessons that you learned from him? Took a while to get there, but there's the question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like so many things, and it's like, versions of it, I'm sure, lessons that I teach my kid, you know what I mean? It's like, is it the exact same story? No. Is it like the moral compass that I've had my entire life? The concept of hard work, like, to find the joy, to do the silly thing, to push the envelope a little bit, to maybe not always follow all the rules. Like, that is it. And that is, I feel like, is a huge responsibility for me. I also feel like there's certain parts of me, to be a speaker, to establish trust, in the way that we talked about in the beginning. Like, if you don't know him or a little bit about him, you don't know me. Right? In the same way that, like, you don't know my mom is the same way, my kids, right? Like, I don't do a 60-minute keynote on my kids, but they always come up. Because if
Oh,
you
for sure.
don't know those little droplets, you don't know me. And to trust me, you have to know me. And when you know, to me,
Hmm.
when you know things that like peel it back a little bit, like I don't have to show you the whole book, but I can peel it back enough that you're like, all right, I'm in. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, all right, I'll show up. It's kind of like, it's like the ante in the poker game. Of like, all right, I'm in. Are you in? Right.
Right,
And
right,
so I
right.
think, and that vulnerability to me at this point, like, doesn't feel, there's nothing vulnerable about that anymore because it's just my life and my
Yep,
truth. And,
exactly.
so it doesn't feel, there's no risk in it because I don't put weight in the judgment, if any, that comes to it
Yeah.
because it's just my truth.
Okay, yeah. So another side of what I was doing with my client Poe was we're really looking at helping entrepreneurs, right? So he wrote a book on entrepreneurship, and with a co-author, and I was sort of supporting that. So one of the things that fascinates me is that, okay, so in Hong Kong is a city where entrepreneurship is just humongous. Like the entrepreneurs coming out of Hong Kong is just bonkers. But in the same way, I go back to the US. My sister lives in Savannah, and I'm reminded of that. There's a certain spirit, like this American can-do attitude or whatever, that is unique. It comes from a totally different place than what we find in Hong Kong. And you talk about your father and your mother both being entrepreneurs, and this is obviously something in you as well. Like these are all branches that are alive and well in you, which you will probably give to your kids. So how do you support entrepreneurs?
Well, I feel like there's a mindfulness around it, of where you spend your money and what do you do. Like it is supporting entrepreneurs is not something I do. It's like a vital part of who I am. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So I feel like that's what we teach our kids in that way of supporting our local economy. It's not framed in that. That's just what we do,
Yeah.
right? And so I think entrepreneurs so much now in leadership, they scale a lot of times at such a rate that I think there's a lot of, it's easy if you're a solo entrepreneur to just rely on yourself, but then you step to that next level, you have to lead it because you are it,
Hmm.
right? Like
Hmm.
the brand is you, and how do you get other people to embrace that and expand that? So a lot of the work that I do with entrepreneurs is really getting clear on who am I and how am I separate from this entity, and what are it's like a Venn diagram, right? It's like,
Yeah.
here's the entity, here's me. There's going to be a significant overlap. How do we get people to embrace that and take that on as theirs, even though it's not theirs? Because I think you're going often with entrepreneurs from a handful of people, and then you're growing and you're trusting. You know what I mean? I think there's a tremendous amount of vulnerability in that too. So I think it leads through. I think there's a through line in all of that.
Hmm. Just so that people can have it in their heads, how do they learn? Okay, so the name of the book and where do they find the book online?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find it online. You can find it at independent bookstores. You could go Barnes and Noble or Amazon, any of those places. So it's Step Up: How to Live with Courage and Become an Everyday Leader, just by me. And there's links to it on my website, which is just ashbeckham.com.
ashbeckham.com. I'm going to say it 17 times so people remember ashbeckham.com.
Yeah.
Let's say see you to your okay, what's your father's name?
Bill.
Bill. Okay, bye Bill. Beautiful photo. Let's move on to the next photo.
All right.
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting